Rooster with another episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of the Dixie Dregs, and we're going to be talking about Steve Morse again. And the Dixie Dregs formed in Augusta, Georgia in 1970, and although they never really blew up or had a popular, following, they did capture a cult following, and lots of rock and jazz and country musicians just fell in love with the music of the Dixie Dregs. So the Dixie Dregs released 6 albums between 1977 and 1982. They broke up around 1983, and Steve Morse, became a commercial airline pilot for a while, and then started working with Kansas on a few albums, and released, Steve Morse Band and Steve Morse solo albums. Eventually, started working with Deep Purple and some of these side, projects like Flying Colors. And the Dixie Dregs did reform in the early 90s. They had a live album, Bringing Back Alive, which is great. Also Full Circle from '94, and they've kind of reformed and disappeared and reformed over the years. They did actually have a big reunion tour in 2018 recently, but I'm a huge Dixie Dregs and Steve Morse fan. So Steve Morse influenced me directly, musically for sure, but then also he made me very curious about music theory and composition and some of the workings, of music. And also exploring other styles of music. Before I really dove into Steve Morse, I was just hopelessly a rock guitarist and rock musician. But then he opened my eyes to jazz and classical and acoustic and country and all this different stuff. And it was very inspiring to just tap into him and notice all the different things that he can do. Because he can shred, he can play classical, he can play jazz, he can play all kinds of stuff. And I did have a lesson in Guitar Player magazine that's a tribute to Steve Morse. That would have been the March 2016 issue. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper into some of his chords and rhythm work, check out my Guitar Player lesson. The opening that's taken off the top from the What If album, and it's something like this. So he's basically doing these random pinch harmonics there with the pick hand in the beginning. Just play the low E, start somewhere around the bridge pickup, and then just move slowly toward the neck like that. And you'll hear these random harmonics pop out. Right? And right there, you're basically doing a D over F sharp, but you're playing that low E, so it's kind of like a D over E to an A right there, over E, like that. Do that random harmonic move again. And then right there after the harmonics, grab that partial G, F sharp to G right there. And then an A power chord to a B power chord. And then do the random harmonics again. Right there, it's kind of a partial D, and then a partial A right there, like an A5. And then do the harmonics again. And right there, it's kind of like this, A over C sharp, but once again, we're playing the low E, so it's like an A over E to E. Cool riff, and I love those harmonics. You can also find them from Vernon Reid and some other players too. But a cool song too. Next is Cruise Control from the Free Fall album, and it's something like this. So right there, we're basically starting with this, and that's an F add 9 right there. So he's basically starting with the volume off, strum that chord, and you're basically fretting, the 3rd fret on the D, the open G, 1st fret on the B, 3rd fret on the high E, and your thumb's also grabbing that F right there with the thumb wrap, like that. Swell it up like that, and then you've got this G7 right there, partial. And then you're going to move up to this B flat, and then it's basically an F right there, like an F over A. Think of that 70s kind of chord inversion right there, that F. So it's a little piece of B flat, a little piece of F, and then go back to that G7 right there. Some kind of muted strums right there, and then did 2 of those hammer-ons on that G7, then a G octave, and then that B flat to F again, and then right here, bizarre. So you're grabbing D, B, and then G. And you're going to grab this D note on the D string, and you're going to move from C sharp to C, and then B flat to B. So it's really cool. He's basically playing like a little kind of G blues lick, but he's doing it with chords like that. Really crafty kind of chord shift. Really cool move, and you gotta watch things like that from Steve Morse. He's a wizard on the fretboard. The next example comes from the song Sleeveless in Seattle from the Full Circle album, and this is technically behind a keyboard solo, so you've really got to keep an eye and an ear out for what Steve plays, because sometimes when he's comping behind a solo, he pulls out really cool stuff like this. It's basically starting with this A sus2, and these are all implied chords right here, and you're basically doing 4 notes per chord, or per like implied chord right here. It's G, A, and then grab that E and B, and then it's like a C sus2, and then a G7 right here, which is really unusual right there, like this. Right here, this is kind of like a D minor 9. You're moving down and grabbing that E. And then right here, it's really weird. It's like an A minor flat 6 right there. Really weird. And then a C over G. And then right here, this is kind of like an F major 7. And then right there, kind of an implied G over B. So it's very involved, and if I just walk through it, I'm a sucker for guitar parts like that. I love it. And here's a different section from the same song, Sleeveless in Seattle, and this actually takes place behind the violin solo. So once again, Steve's pulling out all this really cool stuff, and it's not even his guitar solo. It's behind a keyboard solo and a violin solo like this. He basically starts with this pick slide into an F sharp and then a D, so it's, and then this partial E, that partial C sharp right there, kind of sliding that partial B into C sharp, so right there, and then right here it's like a partial D major. So you're just basically grabbing that, D, F sharp, and A right there. And then that ends with a B6 right here. So it's really unusual. So right there, so far. And then grab that F sharp again and go to D right there. F sharp 5 to D5. And right here it's C sharp minor. You're going to basically grab that, and then the open A with that E note right there, so that's kind of like an A5. And then right here, it's really unusual, so that's like B major and a little part of G sharp 5, and then A major, and then kind of like a B sus2, and then C sharp. Like that. So all the way through this. Really cool, and I love this part. That's really cool. It's a really cool song too, so check out Sleeveless in Seattle. Next to the song Sleep from the Freefall album, and I did feature this in the Chords of Steve Morse Chordplay episode from a couple years ago, but now we're talking about the Dixie Dregs, and I wanted to feature this again because I really love this song. It's really hard to play. It's actually played on a 12-string guitar, but Sleep is something like this. And just keeps looping right there. So honestly, this would be a lot easier to learn reading it, from a transcription than it would to just relay it like this. But I'm going to walk through it kind of slow just so you can see what's going on. There's this weaving, like overlapping chord pattern happening. And we're basically weaving and kind of flirting with E add 9, like for that over L tonality, that real dreamy kind of sound. Start with this B note, and you hear it go to E right there. And then A, like an A5 to A6. It's kind of like an F sharp 6 to F sharp 7. And then right there it kind of flips because now you've got A, and then E, and then to D right there, and then A, and then E, and then this F sharp, and then you've got this. Very involved, but I wanted to demonstrate this again because that's a great, guitar part. It's really challenging, and if you fret it and finger it that way, where you kind of assign a finger, per fret, it's a huge workout for your fret hand and picking hand too. Another example of those Steve Morse, challenges. It's really hard, but so cool to play. Okay, last but not least is Perpetual Reality from the Full Circle album, and this is one of my favorite things ever. It's so cool, like this. Tasty. It almost sounds like this classical kind of Bach thing, but we're flirting with E major 7 right there in the beginning. So you're grabbing a low E, the low E open, then that D sharp to E, low E open, E to F sharp, low E open, and then just grab G sharp. And then you're going to convert that to C sharp right there, which is so cool. It's like a C sharp 9 implied. And then you're moving over to this G sharp, kind of a G sharp flat 13. And then you're moving up to this A, like an A sharp 11. And then you're moving back to this, it's kind of like an E minor major 7 implied. Because right there you're going to G instead of that G sharp. And then you're actually saying on G right there. So you're kind of doing the open G. And end up on that A right there. And then, let's see. This part, so that's a D11. Moving back to that partial A, and then it's like a partial A, and then you're kind of like bending your way back to E. So that's really challenging, really tough, and I'm just kind of walking through it right there. Hopefully I'm not messing it up too bad, but as soon as I first heard that and then learned it, I just fell in love with it, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Challenging. Actually, all of Steve Morse music is really hard to play, and it's just that satisfying kind of challenge, when you can actually do it and you're like, oh my gosh, I can finally play this lick or riff or song from Steve Morse and or Dixie Dregs. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Dixie Dregs. And like I just mentioned, I mean, Steve Morse and his music is extremely hard to play. It's very unorthodox and challenging, very advanced, and he's one of the few guitarists, like when I sit down and work on some of his music, it almost gives me like a headache in a way, because I really have to push myself. I have to think about what I'm doing. It's a physical challenge, but also a mental challenge too. And he really is one of those players where you might start sweating, just working on some of his music. And I love that, where it's like this, mountain that you're trying to climb, and it's very treacherous and dangerous, and you could probably, fall or hurt yourself or whatever, but you just keep trying to get to the top, And I don't know if I'll ever, scale the top of Mount Morse or whatever, but I love the challenge, just trying to push myself, to play like Steve Morse and pull off some of these things that he's been doing for decades and decades. A legend of the guitar for sure, and a huge influence of mine. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.